Greetings. This is very serious. This is my serious face. Serious. A little something different today. I actually want to talk a little bit about my personal feelings regarding the tone wood debate, which is something that I guess is an explosive topic in the interwebs. I just want to start by saying that I am not a guitar builder. I've built some guitars from parts over the years, quite a few, repaired innumerable guitars, owned way too many instruments, probably, of every imaginable variety of combinations of woods for both body, neck, and even construction of neck through, glued in, set, bolt on, 6 bolt, 4 bolt, 3 bolt, uh, and monocoque construction, even with the Steinberger one piece XL2A that I had that was made out of aerospace carbon fiber blend. There was an epoxy resin, actually, it wasn't carbon fiber. But anyway, it had some fibers in it. It was a proprietary Steinberger blend that maybe Ned will tell me someday what it is. It's probably like ground up Wheaties or something that's put in the polymer. But anyway, so, I mean, I've owned and played just, I believe, a pretty incredible cross-section of what's available and what has been available over the entire lifespan of the electric bass. And I've been doing that for the past 33 years. So that's experience. Maybe someone could have the same amount of experience in a shorter amount of time, or less experience in a longer amount of time. That's irrelevant. I'm only talking about myself and my personal experience. The big debate, or the big argument, because I tend to think of debates as when facts are presented from both sides. Arguments are just opinion thrown at each other, and that's kind of what this seems to be. But the big argument is that there's one camp over here that says that the wood species used in the construction of an electric, we're talking about electric, I should just clarify. Acoustic guitar, completely different thing. We're talking about electric solid body instruments. The species of wood utilized in the construction of an electric solid body bass, let's just say bass, or guitar for that matter, but anyway, makes a huge difference in the tone of said guitar. And the other camp saying, not so much, really, and I defy you to be able to tell the difference in a blind test. Now, a blind test would be probably as close as you could get to a scientific test, but even still, that depends upon the perceptive abilities of the people involved in the test. You'd have to have a giant control group sampling. I don't know if that is really even possible. I mean, it's possible, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. So it's best for people that have a vast amount of experience maybe to chime in. That would probably be the closest thing you could get to that, which is what I'm doing. Vast amount of experience. That sounds like kind of hyperbole, but anyway. So here's my thoughts on this subject. I remember specifically reading about tone wood. And where I read about tone wood, it was many, many years ago. Where I first heard that term was on the Warmouth website. Wow. It wasn't a website, it was a catalog. What am I even talking about? They didn't have the web back then. This was 1985, maybe, 84. And I got the catalog, and it went through and listed these different species of wood that they used in their bodies and in their necks, and then it gave them attributes for their tonality, potential tonality, saying things like ash would be brighter than mahogany, and alder would have better high mid-range qualities than walnut or something. And I remember at the time thinking, this sounds like complete voodoo to me. I mean, because from a scientific perspective, the only way that you could tell that would be through pretty incredible testing methods, which, acoustic testing methods, which I don't think they had. I think that it was perception and personal feelings that were put out there as a sales pitch, basically. Marketing. That's what it really is. And perception equals reality, which is kind of the whole gist of this video that I'm doing right now. So yeah, I remember thinking tone woods, wow, that's weird. And especially when I got my Steinberger, I went from a 1963, I had been playing a 1963 Precision, and I had a 1970s Guild B301, and I then got the Steinberger. And I had them all at the same time. How I was able to do that at age 18 is a whole nother story, and I think is something that could never be repeated today, unless said 18-year-old was rich, because back then, 60s Fender Precision bass was just an old bass. I mean, there was a slight chance that it would be expensive, but it certainly wasn't this obscene collector's world that we live in today. Anywho, back to the point. So I had a set neck bass that was made with mahogany body and neck, and a rosewood fingerboard. That was the Guild B301. I had a alder body bolt-on maple neck with a rosewood fingerboard that was the Precision. And then I had a completely sci-fi polymer aerospace monocoque unibody bass with a phenolic resin fingerboard. So, wow. I recorded quite a bit at that point with a little Fostex recorder. Remember those little Fostex 4-track cassette recorders? They were great. A lot of fun. And I remember the thing that I came away with from a lot of those recordings was that it sounded really kind of the same. And that was when I first started understanding about my sound. If you, as a bass player, borrowed my bass, you're not going to sound like me. You're going to sound like you. Because a lot of the tone, in my opinion, once you get beyond the pickups and everything, is in your hands. And it's your sustain, it's your attack, it's your vibrato or lack thereof. It's the it gets down to a lot of factors. I mean, like how thick are the calluses on your fingers? Do you dig in, hit your pinky, or use a pick, or use your fingernails like a pick? That's what I meant to say, not pinky, but picky. Your pickies. Those things make your sound much more relevant to what people hear than the wood that is used in the bass that you are using. And I really started to think, yeah, I can get my sound on pretty much any bass. I mean, I can pick up a bass and sound like me. And there's great stories from many, many bass players who meet their bass hero and they're like, oh, can I play your bass or whatever? And they, yeah, sure. And then they pick it up and play it. It's like, wow, I don't sound anything like my hero. That doesn't sound like my hero's bass. That sounds like me on a bass. I really feel that a lot of the evidence that's been put forth, evidence, air quotes, that's been put forth, has been put forth by the side over here that says that not so much on the tone wood affecting the sound. Tone wood, the species of wood affecting the sound. People on this side of the argument are much more vitriolic, and they start throwing insults almost immediately. I think it's kind of evened out now. They're just everyone's insulting each other, but I could be wrong about that. But it's really hard to come to any kind of conclusion as far as from a scientific standpoint when there's no evidence. That's just conjecture. If I say, you know, wow, this rosewood fingerboard ash body bass makes my blueberries taste sweeter. Okay, good for you. And I feel that's the same way, really. If you have a mahogany body guitar with a walnut neck and a ebony fretboard, and you think it sounds bright, then it sounds bright to you. And then no one can tell you any different. If you have the opposite, and you have some maple body, maple neck, maple fretboard bass, and you think it sounds warm, who's going to tell you any different? I think the perception equals reality thing also goes to, you listen to Motown recordings. Many, 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 majority of them recorded on early Fender precision basses, early 60s, mid 60s Fender precision basses. And so right away people think, oh, well, those were rosewood fingerboard basses, and they're all warm and woody sounding recordings, so therefore rosewood fingerboards sound warm. Wow, I don't know. I mean, let's just roll that back a little bit more. In the 50s, the bass sound of recorded music, electric bass sound on recorded music in the 50s, was very warm and woody sounding. Maybe too much on a lot of things. All of those were recorded with a maple fretboard instrument because Fender didn't even offer a rosewood fingerboard on their basses until the late 50s. Very late 50s. So what was it then? People saw pictures of James Jamerson and all these people playing this rosewood. They look back, they see these pictures, they're like, well, yeah, there you go. And it was a rosewood fretboard, so therefore it was warm and woody. That's why it was that way. No, that doesn't explain the maple fretboard basses that were used for the previous 10 years, and even during a lot of those recordings. Why did they sound so woody? Why did they sound so warm? Well, they had a piece of foam stuck up against the strings right at the bridge that made every note sound like you were smacking slab of bacon against, it was just boom, boom, boom. It has nothing to do with the tone wood whatsoever. Tone wood. That has nothing to do with the body construction whatsoever. That has to do with the hardware that was utilized. And recording hardware, microphones, preamps, tube preamps. There's something to be said there that's pretty scientific. You could look at the bass or treble roll-off of an instrument being recorded with a solid-state preamp, a tube preamp. I'm sure that you can get peak variations and see that and chart it and go, yep, nope, yep. You can't do that with an instrument that is a solid body instrument, electric instrument. You can't make that kind of an assumption because I've heard what I thought was, to my ears, again, perception, really warm, full, just super tasty sounding guitar, and come to find out it was played on a Dan Armstrong that was made out of acrylic, which is not a wood. Acrylic, it's a polymer, plastic, freaking plastic instrument. And it sounded warmer than, it was delicious sounding. And then I've heard absolutely glassy sounding, crystalline sounding guitar that was played on a guitar that was made with a body of mahogany, which would be the opposite of what you would think, kind of with conventional wisdom. I don't really think that there is a definitive answer to this argument, because arguments usually aren't. There isn't. It's opinion versus opinion, and it'll never be decided. It's just, these people think this thing, those people think that thing, and saying, oh, because everyone feels this way, it's correct, would have us, pre-Copernicus, the sun revolves around the earth, or the world's flat, or George Bush won the first election. These types of, no, I'm only kidding about that last thing. Not going to get political, but he did. And so, it really is your opinion. Now, why does this matter? Only because people ask me. That's the only reason. That is the only reason I'm making this video. And boredom. But people ask me all the time about necks, specifically fretboards, excuse me. I like the sound of a rosewood fretboard more than the sound of a maple fretboard. And that's something I have always countered when someone says that to me. I just feel it's my duty. If you're asking me about, what do you prefer? Or don't you like the sound of that rosewood? Doesn't that rosewood fretboard sound warm? You're talking about a piece of wood, yes, but it has strips of metal embedded into it that when you push down on the string, takes your finger and the wood out of the equation, and it's metal on metal contact. Pure and simple. If you have finger on wood contact, that's not good for your fingerboard, for one thing, unless you're playing a fretless, and then that's a whole different thing. But on a fretted instrument, the fretboard does nothing other than anchor the frets to the neck. It's the little bridge between the two. That's all it is. It looks a certain way. You don't even feel it under your fingers. Again, this is not something you're contacting with your fingers. You're contacting the string, and the string's contacting the fret wire. Metal to metal. Especially if you play with a pick, you take your other hand and the pads of your fingers, or the meat of your thumb or whatever, completely out of the equation, and you're talking about a plectrum, piece of hard plastic, or whatever other construction you want to use. And then it's plastic on metal and metal on metal. And you think about bass players who play with a pick, and you can't say they all sound one way. But what you can say is, could you tell the difference between Chris Squire playing these ice pick, sharp, bright lines. What was he using? Well, he must have been using maple fretboard, right? Because that's really bright. No, he was using a Rickenbacker with a rosewood fretboard. And by the same token, you're going to listen to some of these big, fat bass lines played by Duck Don and all his early stuff. I mean, he played on a Fender. A lot of stuff was on a maple fretboard Fender. So think about the fretboard tone wood debate from the perspective of, if it's a fretted fretboard, it's string metal on fret metal. It's metal to metal. There's no wood that comes into play whatsoever in that connection. Open notes would be the same thing. If you're playing on open notes, can you tell the difference in the warmth versus the brightness of a maple versus a rosewood or ebony or ovunkole or wenge or phenolic or any of these things, walnut? I don't think so. I really don't think you can. I think it's your perception. I think you look at the bright maple, shiny, light-colored wood, and your mind says bright. And you look at the dark, grained, unfinished, typically, raw wood of a rosewood fretboard, and you think warm, chocolatey goodness. I think it's perception equals reality. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on wood species in both bodies and fretboards. I think it's just play what you like the looks of. Obviously, play what you like the sound of. But I think that has to do a lot more with the pickups and the adjustability of the tone via the electronic circuit that is contained in said instrument, as opposed to the wood or other material that it's made from. For me, the perfect wood for an instrument is hitting that dog outside. No, is stable, so it won't be warping and shifting all over the place. So a stable wood, preferably a light weight wood, something that, man, by the end of the night, you're not just going, oh, my shoulder. I mean, if you can have, for me, if I can have a bass that weighs 7 pounds, oh, brilliant. I did, actually. I've had a couple of those. The Warwick that I had was a perfect example. I had a Warwick Streamer Standard that was made from Carolina and super lightweight. I think it weighed under 7 pounds, that bass. It was like 6 pounds, 10 ounces or something like that when I weighed it to ship it. Because, of course, I sold it, Bill Batty. But I did play it for quite a few years, and I loved it. It played great. It had a Warwick neck, which I think their necks are fantastic. It was Wenge and Ovunkole. It felt good. And every bit as bright as any maple fretboard and neck instrument I've ever owned. I tend to like bolt-on necks. That joint construction of bolting onto the body as opposed to through neck or set neck, just because of the fact that, if something happens with the neck, you can take it off and replace it with another one. Or you can unbolt it, put it into a smaller package, and ship it, which is handy if you sell instruments, which I've done a few times. But so it would be stable, it would be lightweight, and it would be attractive. Those are the things that are really important to me anyway. This bass here I like very much. I don't think that the wood, mahogany, that it's made out of makes a difference other than the fact that it's very beautiful. It's beautiful wood. And it is stable. And by stable, I mean it's not, shifting, kind of bend or anything, warp. So there's a solidity to it to anchor the bolt-on neck, which is made of maple, with a maple fretboard. That's why, that's the appeal of this. It's not really that light, but it's not really that heavy either. I think this probably weighs around maybe 9 pounds, 8.5, something like that. Certainly heavier than the Warwick was, but it's lighter than, I had a Gibson at one point in my life. I had a Victory bass that weighed, I think it weighed the same as the engine block in my Yugo. I'm pretty sure. Close, maybe a little bit more. No, I think it weighed almost 12 pounds. And that was ridiculous. And not only that, but the neck went, whoa. It was neck heavy because the headstock, as big as this headstock is, it has that giant, long Gibson headstock. That was just, that wasn't a pleasant bass to play. I don't even remember what the body construction was. I think it might have even been maple, which is just a really heavy wood. And Gibson used that a lot. Gibson used maple bodies for a lot of their instruments over the 70s especially. So there you go. This is by far my longest and most rambling video. And this one didn't even contain any playing. I couldn't go through the video without picking up my bass, though. You notice that. So I hope that gives you some food for thought. I'm not saying I'm right at all. I'm just saying that's my opinion. And I'm sure you have your own opinions. And bully for you. And me both. But what I will say is that I feel like the people out there that are putting forth their opinion as fact are just making asses of themselves. It's just opinion. Just play what you like, regardless. And if you think that maple fretboards sound brighter than rosewood, whatever, that's great. Or if you think that a Zebrano wood over quilt mahogany koa laminate is going to give you, a boost in the 2400K range. If you're willing to pay for it, then hey, I hope it does, and I hope you get that perception met. So there you go. And I'm having coffee. I'm going to have some more. Cheers. Oh, you know what? One thing I have found is that polka dot coffee mugs bring out a certain sweetness in my coffee. Nuttier. It's kind of nutty. Yeah. Have fun out there.